right? How it's really done. So I'm so thankful for Dr. Patrick coming today. He's come all the way from out of the country. We're so thankful. Such a warrior, loved people. I want to say he loved the young people, but Dr. Patrick just loved people. And he loved this nation. And he has proven it. And when you hear him tonight, I tell you, you'll go back so full and with so much knowledge, ready to work on the front lines like he's doing. And many of you guys are on the front lines, but he's going to give you some things, some tools to work with, and you're just going to be on fire. Along with our young people that are here today, thank you so much for coming. This is our youth. Let's give them a hand clap. Thank you so much. Hallelujah. Abby, everyone, thank you so much. So we're going to open up with prayer, and I'm going to ask my friend Heidi to come up and lead the invocation tonight.
Well, I drove from Petoskey to get here, so I was just in the neighborhood. So please join me as we pray. Heavenly Father, we come to you because Jesus has enabled us to come before you, before your throne of grace and mercy, to find help in time of need. I ask you, Holy Spirit, that you hover over the hearts and minds of all of us here tonight. Everybody has made time and space to be here. We pray that you would anoint the speakers. May the passion that you have put within them pour out of their mouths, and may we receive and hear and be changed because of what we hear tonight. Lord, there is a dark world around us, but we bring your kingdom and we bring your light. Just set us on fire tonight, Holy Spirit, to go out and impact wherever you plant us. May we be fruitful and glorify you in all that we say and do. It's in your name we pray, Jesus. Amen.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Beautiful. I'm going to have Grace. Will you come up and sing the national anthem for us? Grace Lunger.
Please join me in singing our national anthem. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hail at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Praise the Lord.
Awesome. Thank you so much. What a blessing. Thank you so much, Grace. You know, we're going to have, I believe, Dr. Rob Steele. Are you here? Dr. Rob Steele is our national committee man for the state of Michigan. Dr. Steele, will you come up?
Let's have everybody else. Let's have everyone stand again, please. We do the pledge to the flag. If you're a serviceman, feel free to salute. Otherwise, place your hands on your heart, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please have a seat. First, thanks to all the servicemen. Maybe we could just have them stand up again. Anybody who served, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. to a total accident, nothing to do with me, but the total accident of birth. I happen to be a son of the American Revolution, Union veteran, Civil War, World War I, World War II, on and on. And my cousins and myself were the first generation in our family that didn't serve. But that's why I'm here tonight, because we have a real battle on our hands. And the battle is over the future for our youth. And our job as the older folks here are to make sure that we do everything we can to pass on the opportunity to these young people here today that was given to us by the sacrifices they've made over generations. And so it's an incumbent upon us, right? And people say to me, oh my God, I work full time as a heart doctor, and I get off work and I'll drive 4 hours to Traverse City, talk 10 minutes and drive home. And they say, well, why do you do that? Well, it was a lot better than dragging through Germany in the mud and this. And I look at them, it's like, why do I do that? This is why we're here. It's for the young people. And you're going to hear from some young people. And I just want to point out, some of the people that are helping here, Turning Point Action and Turning Point USA, separate groups, but Turning Point Action helping us on some political here, right here. Victory 2024. You've just seen what happens with 90 days of a bad state legislature, what that does in the last year. But Turning Point Action for you young people, when I got involved, well, I've only been involved with partisan politics for about 10 years. I got involved with a group called the Heritage Foundation when I was in my 20s. It was a trifold, stapled together thing, nothing going on. There was no place for young people to turn, to get involved and to get motivated and to go to some place where they were going to learn, have fun, and find out what the future could be for them if they wanted to do it. And Turning Point Action is doing that, and they're putting together the opportunity for young people to get involved, to get plugged in, to learn about what's important in their future and how to get it, and have fun while doing it. Because a lot of times we get together and we do things and we tend to get up and give lectures and do all this stuff, but it's volunteer. We're here on a volunteer basis, and we don't have any bosses here. We're here to save the future on a volunteer basis, and that's what Turning Point Action, one of the things they understand best is that it is volunteer, and so they're going to have fun while they're doing it. So thank you. Luke is coming up somewhere in here, and some of the other Turning Point Action people. But thank you, everyone, for coming out to be here, and thank you, Bernadette, for putting this on. She's incredible. I walked in and she said, well, I want you to do X. And I just said, you tell me what to do, Bernadette, because everybody knows when Bernadette tells you to do something, that's what you go do. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Steele. What a blessing. Thank you so much. Well, I believe all of our speakers, young people here, I know Isaac and Titus are ambassadors. We have Riley. They're all working with Turning Point, and we would like to just engage all the young people. But I want to recognize we have some people that are running for office in 2024. And before we go forward, I know we have, first of all, Melinda Pagel. She is our co-chair for the state of Michigan, and she brought her children here. Melinda has been a fighter on the front line, still a fighter on the front line. We're so appreciative to have you, Melinda, in the state of Michigan. Will you stand up and let us just honor you? Yeah, we want to honor her. Thank you so much. And we have Jason Ikes on the front row. And there's other people, whoever's running for Congress, Senate, school board in 2024. Will you stand up? Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Jason. Yes. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much for being here, Rebecca and Jason. Thank you so much. You guys, thank you for standing up and to run. And who's that? Robert? He didn't stand up, but hello, Robert, thank you so much for... Oh, Robert, yes. Oh, our good friend Robert. Thank you, Robert. So before we get started, I want to talk a little bit about our first speaker, Tamara Bowman. Tamara is a very dear friend of mine. She's a lifelong resident of West Michigan, having graduated from Grand Valley State University with a major in business and marketing. She is richly experienced in corporate, civic, and nonprofit arenas, including an array of experiences in the financial services, real estate, sales, and consulting. For the past 22 years, she has guided the energy of local and national nonprofit organizations through resources, organizational, and leadership development. In 2012, Tamara formed Winning Within, LLC, which focuses on helping others understand that we each possess the God-given ability to have interior victory over the strategies and sufferings in our world. Through intentionally structuring her journey into story and storytelling, She will share with us tonight, hoping we all will be inspired, created even better stories than she has in the context of most beautiful story ever told. I want to welcome Tamara. As we go out to lunch and breakfast periodically, she always just has such a wealth of knowledge and wisdom, just like iron sharpens iron. And I just wanted her to come before the young people tonight because not only is she a beautiful soul, she's a woman of wisdom, and she gets it. So Tamara, we welcome you. Come on up.
Well, thank you so much, Bernadette. I hope I can live up to that. Bernadette told me to be here. She did not say I would be part of the young group, but that's okay because I've got some experience that I want to share with the young group. And it's been said that the forest has a better story than the tree. Now, that may be true, but what it really does say to us is that each of our stories, and within each of us, there is a story that wants to be told. And that story will and does and can have impact on who you share it with. The other piece of that is that in that story that's within each of you, you are the main character. Think about that. There's no one else that can speak the story like you can. Being that main character, you may be called to face your greatest fears, your longings, your risks. But it's very important that in the context of your story, in mine, that we all realize that we do have the ability to tell a better story. And the reason we have that ability is because there is a co-author, a co-writer, a co-creator out there that wants us to. Donald Miller, author, put it this way. He said, "Enjoy your place in God's story. The beauty of it means that you matter. And you may create and write within that story just like I have created you." So what would this look like for you? What would it take for you to live and create and write a better story? What would it look like for you to go to that interior that only you know, because you are the main man or the main woman in that story? But what would it take for you to look at that and say, I want to write a better story? I invite you for the next few minutes to orient yourself with me in that space of story. Come with me to the Greenwell Restaurant. How many have been there and know where that is? Is that Cherry Street? Is that right? Cherry, thank you. Grand Rapids. I am there several years ago meeting a friend of mine, not a longtime friend. We had actually met through a mutual friend of ours. But we got connected and we thought, this would be nice. Let's continue this friendship. So we planned on meeting for dinner. And through the course of getting started in conversation and ordering, we talked about a lot of things of life and kids and business. And then it turned to religion. And she said to me, she shared with me that she was going through a journey through a religion and what it meant to her and what her practices were. And as she was talking, I was listening, but I started listening more intently because I was intrigued. I wasn't familiar with it. I had heard about it, but I thought, I want to know more. So I was intently listening, and then this quote came up by the leader of her particular belief system. And the quote was, "There's only 3 things in life that really matter: how much I have loved, how gently I have lived, and how quickly I can let go of those things that don't belong to me." I thought, I like that. And when she was done, I said, what strikes me is that my Jesus could have said the same thing. he loved, he lived gently, and he had to let go of so much while he walked this earth. And she stopped and she looked at me and she said, but look where it got him. Now, some of you might think those are fighting words, but that wouldn't take me to where I needed to go. So I was stunned. I didn't miss a beat. And I said, but look where it got me. Amen? Look where it got me. Our evening went on in love, in friendship, because that's why we were there. I left and I had about a 40-minute drive home, and I started thinking about that. And then the days and the weeks and the months went on, and I'm still thinking about my words. Look where it got me. And then I started thinking about my journey and my story and the events in my life. And I started thinking about my friend's comment. What did that mean, that Jesus' story ended on Saturday? In that dark day of despair? I know mine didn't. So then I'm starting to say, but wait a minute, there's Resurrection Sunday. I know what that means. That means aliveness. That means hope. That means reconciliation. That means that he broke down the walls of hostility and united each and every one of us. But I'm going through my days and weeks and months and years, and in that space, I started realizing it wasn't my look where it got me. It was, Tamara, where did it get you? Where did that Resurrection Sunday get you in your life, in your story? What part of your story and your journey did end that day? What stories can you take and say, you know what, in the context of the most beautiful story ever written, how can I rewrite? How can I make a better story for myself? And I can teach my children. I can teach the youth. I can talk about it. What I knew is that my story doesn't end on that Saturday. My story moved into Sunday. And what I was called to in those months and years following that was reliving a story in my life that did end on that Saturday. And I recognize that I have the power and the authority of the resurrected Jesus Christ to rewrite those moments, that story, because that's what God wants me to do. So I am a young girl in Jenison, Michigan. I have two sisters. We're each a year apart, so we had a busy family. 4 years later, my brother came. My mom stayed home to raise us. My father was a proud member of the United States Marine Corps, and following that, he became a land developer. Life was good. Except for there was another component to our family, and it was a disease called alcoholism. And as a young girl and a young teen, I lived with my siblings the effects of that disease on our family and on our father, on our extended family. But it wasn't until the church eventually said to my dad, Jim, you're too much of a mess. You need to leave the church, and then when you're ready to repent, and then sign back up and acknowledge church order, we're going to ask you to leave. And so he did. And so did they. That was traumatic. That was painful. That was a story that happened. And sadly, my dad never recovered from alcoholism, and 7 years later, he passed away. So I'm going into my youth, into my young 20s, and into my 30s, and I'm hearing this story that ended, for me, that Saturday. It was dark. It was despair. It was confusion. But I moved through life carrying that. And as I got to know God more, and he became bigger and bigger in my life, the question became bigger and bigger, why? Why did this happen? Why wasn't my father able to experience that resurrected Sunday of love and care and compassion and acceptance? But no, it's time for you to leave. So I go on, and I'm now have experienced this with my friend, and I am now living the question, where did it get you, Tamara? How can I rewrite this story so that I can make it a better one? 40 years later, God said, it's time. And I called that pastor and I said, Pastor, I'd like to have a cup of coffee with you. He agreed. So we met for coffee a few weeks later, and I had a list of questions with me, and we sat down and we got reacquainted because it had been 40 years, and I said, the first thing I do want to say to you, sir, is that I come in love. I needed to stay on that side of resurrection, right? Aliveness, light. Because I'm going to rewrite this story, folks, and it's not going to contain any of that dark Saturday. So we talk. I say, why? Why? My dad had a disease. My dad was sick. Why did the church ask him to leave? He gave me his explanation. I said, well, tell me about that day for you. And he told me. And we had good conversation, and it would be take too much tonight to share that with you, but I do want to bring you to the end of that conversation, because one of my last questions was, do you think that the church forgot about love? He said yes. And then he said this, Tamara, let's put your father in his rightful place. He put him on the cross, and he said, Jim, today you will be with me in paradise. And I can now rewrite my story about my father, give him a voice, and bring my voice to others to say there is hope. Whatever your circumstances are, it does not have to end for you or for family or for friends on that day. There is hope. There is someone who wants you to write a better story. There is someone who wrote the most beautiful story on earth so that you and I can create new stories for ourselves. And I'm going to close with the Psalms. God rewrote the text of my life. He rewrote the text of your life when I opened the book of my heart to his eyes. And in that rewriting, remember this, you don't have a past, you have a testimony. Thank you.
Beautiful. Awesome. Wow, thank you so much, Tamara. Wow, okay, wow, thank you so much. The young people up, we're going to give you guys 5 minutes each. Thank you. We're going to give you young people 5 minutes each to speak, and it's exciting, and we're going to get Dr. Byrne up. Luke Malice, you're going to be first. Luke is first and foremost a follower of Jesus Christ. He is the Great Lakes Field Manager for Turning Point Action, which encompasses the battleground states of Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania. In addition to his role with Turning Point, he is also the youth chairman for the 8th Congressional District Republican Party, executive committee member of the state of Michigan. Wow, thank you, youth. And is one of the youngest individuals helping to grow Michigan's Republican Party. He is responsible for overseeing his TPA representative in the field to register new voters, recruit precinct delegates, attend local GOP meetings, and develop strong grassroots activist network throughout the entire state of Michigan. It is his job to boldly empower voters in these states to engage the conservative base at the grassroots level to fight for and take back America. And I can truly say, Luke is always on the road. When we call, he's traveling somewhere all the time. Thank you so much, Luke, for what you do.
Thank you, Bernadette. So tonight's going to be a little bit of a different talk than I normally would have. Normally it's talking about, and I'll get into a little bit about the Turning Point Action stuff, but I have my awesome field rep, Riley Linting here, who can kind of dig into that a little bit as well. But when I talked to Bernadette, and I want to thank her for setting this up, and I want to genuinely thank you for your heart and for, every one of us are blessed because of you. The entire state of Michigan, and, the Lord is using you in mighty ways, and we really appreciate you. So thank you. So Bernadette and I were talking a couple weeks ago, and it kind of goes into what Tamara was talking about is, your life story. And what the Lord had said on my heart before coming here was I just wanted to, one, give encouragement to young people and to parents and grandparents or aunt and uncles. And part of my story with that encompasses my Aunt Heidi. And because of her, my life story has been rewritten because of her and my uncle. And my Uncle Bill is up in Petoskey, like you said. And back when I was younger, I envisioned that I was going to get involved in politics at some point, and I was going to, maybe be a politician or something. But as time went on, I went through, the public school system, got into sports and everything. All my friends, they all were going off to college. I got to this point where I was raised up with good Christian conservative values. I was instilled with what made America great, that we were truly founded upon Christian principle. And so I had all these values. I knew that going in the public, college direction is just going to take me so off course. But you have all your friends going that direction, right? And you're sitting there and you're watching and you're like, Lord, I know I shouldn't go, but I feel like I have to because everybody else is doing this. Well, I want to be here to encourage you young people to know that you do not have to take that course, because I stood, my ground, and now looking back, I am so thankful looking back that I didn't go that path, because I had best friends, I can say, that grew up as good, Christians, and they were in good Christian conservative households. They won't even talk to me anymore because they went to Michigan State or they went to University of Michigan. They refuse to talk to me, and the friendship is just not even existent anymore, which blows my mind, and it's so sad, and it shows just what they're doing is indoctrinating, our young people. And I just want to encourage you guys to know that you can stand firm in knowing that we need a next generation of young people that are willing to stand up and say, I'm going to do something different, because clearly where we're at as a nation right now, it shows that what is happening, in the schools is causing this to happen. Abraham Lincoln said, the philosophy in the schoolroom in one generation is going to be the philosophy of government in the next. Look at where we're at, folks. I mean, it's scary. So with that, I just wanted to kind of dig into Turning Point Action's role in a lot of this. We're going to be rolling out a lot of coalitions. So coalitions are very important when it comes to, engaging the grassroots. And the grassroots are, our bread and butter at Turning Point Action. And Lord really tapped on me and let me know that, we're going to win Michigan back through the church. We're going to win Michigan back through people of faith, because we were founded on, we the people that genuinely were followers of Jesus Christ. Our founding fathers were followers of Jesus Christ. And we can take back our state and our country at the end of the day, but we have to do it the right way. And I believe that we're going to do it through the church. So I've been working super hard for the past 8 months. Riley can attest to this. We've been building out a faith coalition, and we're going to be doing a huge ballot chase initiative throughout the churches in the state of Michigan. And we've been partnering with different organizations to make sure that we can do the absentee balloting, like within under 30 seconds. We can register these people to be absentee, voters, and they're already registered to vote. We only had 8% of registered Republicans. We can see off of data, 8% of registered Republicans that go to church in Michigan midterm last time only voted in Michigan. It's insane. If we would have had in 25 different key counties, just 12% show up and vote, we would have won the Michigan House and the Senate. If we would have had 14% in the church show up, that's the gubernatorial race in 25 key different areas. So we need to embolden activists. We need to be able to go out there, and that's what we're here for. We're going to come out there. So go on to our website at turningpointaction.com. Make sure that you can sign up on our coalitions page. You can just put in your name, where you're from, and then we'll reach out to you, and we will get you plugged in with what we're doing. But I'm going to turn it over to Riley, I think, next, so she can talk a little bit more about Turning Point Action. So thank you, Byrne.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Luke. Riley's next. Thank you, Riley. Riley Linton is a former student at Grand Valley State University. Her experience with mask and vaccination mandates, woke student culture, and indoctrination led her to run for MIGOP youth chair. She is now finishing her studies at Liberty University online while she helps others get involved through her role as MIGOP youth chair and field rep for the Turning Point Action. Riley is here along with her mother and her little sister who are on fire. So thank you, Riley. Come up and give us your speech.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I've been spending a lot of time on the east side of the state recently, and it's been amazing getting a lot of great work done over there, but I love an excuse to come over to the west side of the state. I wouldn't really call it an excuse. I've been counting down the days for this event, so it's been amazing. Last night, I was at Calvin University in Grand Rapids, so it was really nice stopping by there, hanging out with their College Republicans chapter, and getting to talk with them about all the amazing things Turning Point Action is working on. The biggest thing we're doing is recruiting precinct delegates and filling those vacancies across the state. And it was so amazing. Calvin is obviously a smaller school, so their chapter was pretty small, but that did not mean they were not energized and ready to take back our state, because every single one of them filled out a form to become a precinct delegate. So that is a huge win. That's really exciting. Yeah. So, but as I'm back, I'm excited to, Bernadette explained that I'm now taking classes at Liberty University, which is such an amazing change. It was amazing getting to experience life at Grand Valley. There were amazing times and experiences, and I did learn a lot there. A lot of it was what I don't like about what's going on, and that's what caused me to get involved. And it's kind of funny because recently I'm like, it was nice. I miss it a little bit. And it kind of makes me think of, your brain, purposely forgets the things as a trauma response, because I was walked on campus and all the pride flags and everything. I'm like, oh, my goodness, never mind. I'm glad to be at Liberty. Learning and receiving an education that actually respects Christianity, encourages it, and all those amazing things. So that has been such a blessing. But with that being said, I go to these college campuses across the state, and it just becomes clear that there's an epidemic of depressed students who feel more alone than ever. And it's truly sad, but it's not really a surprise, because these students are told that they need to be silent, that they are hateful if they disagree with the left and the left's agenda. And so they're told to sit in silence, not to speak up, and to basically accept everyone for who they are. Speak your truth. Speak your truth. There's no truth. You're just told to speak. Everyone has their individual truth, and that's what we're told, to encourage and respect and all the things. And so it's very unsurprising that we all have all these people who feel super, super alone, because they're surrounding themselves with people who don't share the same values and don't have any kind of moral code at all. And so my words of encouragement to any young person or anyone at all truly is, yes, you don't need to not go near someone because they disagree with you. That's not what I'm saying at all. That's a huge thing that we need to be better at. But with that being said, do not fear speaking up because you think you will be isolated. Because that is what's keeping you feeling isolated, is not speaking up and sitting in these groups pretending that you agree with this woke nonsense. That's where the enemy wants you to sit. It wants you to sit in the lies and the loneliness. And that is why we have so many students feeling alone, because we're not dumb, okay? And so you sit there and you know when something's not right. You can feel it in your heart. And a lot more people feel that than we even think, especially on these campuses. They know something is not right. And that gives me hope, because there's a lot more conservatives on campuses than we even realize. Some of them just don't even know that they are more conservative. They're told, girls, support your black-owned businesses, support your gay-owned businesses. How about we start supporting good people with morals? Because they get so caught up in the morals, the game of morals, you have to support this person because of this or that or this. At the end of the day, the reasons they're telling us to support these different organizations are all off of features and characteristics that do not define us in the slightest bit. I don't care what your sexuality is. I don't care what your skin color is. Are you a good person? And so when we're told that morals and the way we should see people is by all these characteristics, the color of your skin, your sexuality, all these things, it's really upsetting. And I don't think anyone's phrasing it this way to these students. They're being brainwashed into thinking that is the proper way to show love to the people around you, when it is not. The best way to show love to the people around you is sharing the truth that you know. And so that is the biggest word of encouragement. Thank you. And so that applies to so many different things. We're being brainwashed on every level. I keep using the word brainwashed. It's so easy to use that word because that's truly what's happening. But these students, we are told, we're receiving a college education, first of all, and we are being told that we will not succeed without the government. And the government actually needs to stay out of some things, because we have a ton of students that are being brainwashed into thinking that the solution to this, that will dig them out of the hole that they're in, that will get them out of college and actually allow them to provide a life for themselves, is tax the rich. We hear all these students chanting, tax the rich. Okay, sounds interesting, but if you think about it, we're really not thinking very much, because if we tax the rich are the people that have the ability to leave the state when they're being taxed to the death. And so who does that tax burden fall on? You. When you get out of college and you're trying to start your career, and look at you, you can't, because you're being taxed to death. And so we need to tell students these things. Like, if you want to graduate and have a successful career and be able to support your family, you really should rethink who you're voting for. And that's one thing Turning Point Action we're working on. We're going around to these colleges and GOP events, and we're talking to everyone and making sure this message gets across, and we get good conservatives in leadership positions like precinct delegates who will defend everything I'm saying right now, and everything that all the speakers are saying. So I think I'm running out of time, so I'll wrap it up. I'm pretty passionate about this, so thank you so much, Bernadette. You're so amazing. I'm so happy to have been here. God bless you all. Thank you.
I love you, Molly. Oh, don't you love her? Don't you love our young people? Aren't they amazing? Amazing. Next, we have, I want to say, Titus and Isaac, right. I was trying to think of the name. Titus and Isaac, not your name, but your station, your channel. Anyway, Titus and Isaac, the Smith Bros, but I think it's man-slave now. What is it? Anyway, I'll let them tell you what it is. As black conservatives, they want to bring awareness to the tyrannical takeover. I better just introduce them. I'm just going to introduce them. They are ambassadors also for Turning Point USA. They're wonderful. Let me just read a little bit about you guys. The brothers have covered very controversial topics like Kyle Rittenhouse, innocent, Black Lives Matter, being corrupt, CRT being racist, abortion is murder, and so much more. The brothers are always looking for new topics to cover so that all of their supporters always stay, updated. They also they interviewed Dr. Byrne many times. They love him dearly, but I'll just let them talk. Here, Titus and Isaac Smith.
Thank you, Mom. We appreciate it. We are not Manslave, by the way. That is not our name. We have our own channels, Titus Ellis Smith on everything, big guy, Isaac Smith, and we have our joint channel, which is called Mansplain. It's a play on words because mansplaining's bad, but we're just men explaining, you know? Anyways, yeah, the attack on the youth is actually crazy right now. Gen Z is under attack like never before. You just, there's so many videos, like we're big reaction people. There's so many videos out there that are just so insane right now. Something I saw. No, yeah.
I was going to say, like, Jeffrey Marson, there's this guy on TikTok who's, like, he's clearly a man. He has, like, a 5 o'clock shadow and lipstick on. He thinks he somehow is seen as a woman. It's actually insane, but he
sees himself as a girl, a little girl. Grown man. I just, I'm so glad. No, him too. Oh. I'm so glad I get to live my childhood as the real girl I am. That's Jeffrey. He's a grown man, maybe 30-something. I don't know. Disgusting.
Pushing 40 for sure. No, but it's weird. He goes on all these has all these videos like just uber glam, like things that girls don't even like. Girls don't look like that. Girls on a regular basis are not looking like that. They're not putting that much work in. And he's every single day. And he's always promoting like. He had like a Patreon, a separate Patreon. So you think if you want to do something to influence young children, like in a positive light, it'd be like just making videos for free, right? Because children don't have jobs, like not infants, but like young children, 10, 5, whatever. They don't have jobs. There's no way for them to pay. This man made a Patreon for children to come on privately and speak to him on how their parents were wrong. That was the first thing. That's why he started the video. Your parents are wrong. And he giggles really creepily and goes, it's okay to say so. And then it goes on this whole rant about how, like, join my Patreon, as if, like, you couldn't just freely do it. You could go to a Telegram channel, but you want to get money from them while you indoctrinate them with all this garbage. Anyways, the youth are clearly on attack. And Dylan Mulvaney's doing this stuff. I think he won some award for Woman of the Year. And all this stuff, we get yelled at for calling this out on a daily basis. The things that, like, 20 years ago wouldn't even be, like, controversial. It's like, yeah, duh. If you're born a man, you're a man. If you're born a woman, you're a woman. Like, that's just something we all knew. But like nowadays, there's such a heavy attack. And what I love about what Charlie Kirk does with Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, all the organizations he's created is he comes to help the youth. He'll go to college campuses, and I think he has a lot of people doing that now. As an ambassador, we're actually allowed to go to college campuses, and people can ask us to speak to the youth, which is something I think I want to do more because they are being brainwashed. And if you do believe the way we do, you're like think that you're alone. And people are out, and it sucks because even doing what I do, having the conservative influencers, because we're social media influencers, and people, like, you still see people coming at you. There's videos made on you. People say, like, you're a fraud, or you make bad content, or, like, you're a grifter. Like, believing what you do means that you're grifting. It's insane. But, my point, Charlie Kirk goes to all these events goes to all these campuses and teaches people the truth. He'll sit there and talk with college students for hours, just trying to explain to them. Stephen Carter does the same thing, where he just tries to get them to understand what they've been taught is not necessarily true. And he doesn't even do it disrespectfully. Just trying to get you guys to understand that, hey, maybe the way that you're being taught in school is not right. Even I know you're in biology class or math class, and they're telling you that a man can be a woman if they want to, and that's in no way relevant. But he just comes to let people know that the truth. And I think the truth, like he says in the Bible, will set you free. But outside of that, or not outside of that, but adding on to that, when we continue to do that outwardly and publicly and standing firm on our ground, that's what's going to affect change. Dana White actually was just on a podcast. I don't know if it was recently or not, but I saw a clip of it on TikTok, and a sponsor called him after he had posted a post in support of Trump. A sponsor called him and said, take it down. A sponsor, he said, I did this on my private, personal Instagram, and the sponsor told him to take it down. They said, take it down. He was like, F you. he said, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to take that down. What are you talking about? He's like, and Theo Von's like, yeah, it's crazy because if you vote for someone that's against what the woke mob or what mainstream media or what celebrities tell you, you are immediately canceled. And that's something that has been going on for a while now. Standing up against that is what's going to affect change. And when you don't care, and which is something we don't do, people will be deeming us, why are you so bold? How do you do that? You're so bold. You're so brave. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm literally just saying what I believe. And I don't care what anyone else thinks. I only care about what my family thinks. I care what God thinks. Like, that's all that really matters to me. Why do you care what some random strangers thinks about you? They don't know you. Like, it's the weirdest thing. But you got anything? I feel like you're about
I think what we're seeing right now is the problem with raising your kids is iPad kids. Because they grow up to see what media tells them to believe, and they just take that with them and hold it in their hearts for all their life. So don't raise your kids as iPad kids. Not a good idea. Let them think for themselves. Just raise them. Parents.
You've been quiet.
No.
What they're doing is wrong.
No, absolutely insane. there's just so many crazy things out there. You're seeing, like, blackface is a big thing right now. You can't do that, all you white people. You can't paint your... Yeah, the craziest thing about blackface, like, there's this video, this white kid who went to a football game. You know how people put the eye black on their face or whatever? Some people make it go down farther, like, you know, they're warriors or whatever. This kid did it at some football game, and it's a trend on TikTok right now. He got suspended from school for doing blackface. And it's not like brown, like what black people actually are. It was literal black, right? Which I think is crazy, because we're not actually... Anyways.
I'm just saying that's in second grade. I'm not black, I'm brown.
Absolutely insane.
Since I was in elementary school.
No, but cancel culture is such a problem, and we love what Turning Point's doing, emboldening people, and that's the biggest thing, letting people know they're not alone, like you were saying. Absolutely important. But yeah, it's just so sad to see what this world is coming to. And good news, though, there is light at the end of the tunnel. As you see right now, statistics prove that Gen Z is trending conservative, right? That generation. So as much as you're seeing all the nonsense with the woke, tranny, racism, all that nonsense, people are just like, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. Like, I'm seeing this dude at the restaurant, crazy video. We see this dude at a restaurant, has like a jaw like a man, right? Built like a man, has makeup on and long hair. The waiter calls him sir. I'm sorry. It's not sir, it's ma'am. Any film, you're seeing that happen all over, and the people, the waiters, whatever, all the bystanders are just like, there's something off about this. This doesn't seem right. Whatever. This is maybe this person should be in a straitjacket. I don't know. Whatever. This is kind of crazy. But as we're seeing, people are starting to wake up like, okay, now we're taking things too far, and this is the evidence of that.
Well, I think this is what happens when you go so extreme. People are like, yeah, I accept that you're gay. Yeah, I accept that you think you're something like a different gender. Sure, like that's fine. It doesn't affect me. Now it is affecting me. Now there's schools in like California where you're not allowed to tell the kid or tell your parents that the kid has decided they want to change genders or transition, like actually transition. You don't have to tell the parents that. They just find out one day.
If a parent is against it, the kid can be taken away from the parent.
Yeah.
It's not just as simple as, oh, you can't say anything. If you disagree with this 10-year-old, 12-year-old decision to change their life forever, I'm sorry, you're not fit to be a parent in California.
Yeah, you're the problem. Yeah, it's insane. So, anyways, and because of all this stuff that's happening, that's why we need to get 2 mics. I've been speaking every time. We're just like, well, yeah.
Check.
Whoa. That's crazy. She.
Yeah.
Sure do.
Okay. Is it because we're black? No, I'm just playing.
Is that a black thing? I'm just kidding. No, I'm playing. I'm kidding.
We love Diamond and Silk. We love them. Just playing.
Anyways, there's this Upward News posted this a few days ago. My friend texted or messaged it to me. He said, Gen Z is trending conservative. This, what's happening? Members of Generation Z, also known as Zoomers, which is something I had never heard of before. They're called, if you're a Gen Z or you're a Zoomer, it says, are assumed to be a largely left-wing demographic. However, a major new report throws cold water on that assumption, including Zoomers, and in particular Zoomer men, might actually be right. 28% of men in Gen Z identify as liberal. That's only 28%, 6 points lower than their millennial peers. Fewer than half, 43% of Gen Z men identify as feminist, and a sharp 11-point drop for millennial men. And it says that a June survey found the share of Zoomers who believe there are only 2 genders had increased by a staggering 40 points over the past years alone. And this is as this stuff is happening in like media, in like on social media, mainstream media, it's being forced into television, Netflix adaptations of TV shows where Queen Charlotte, although it was a good show, is somehow a black woman. I know it's based off of the Bridgerton. Anyways, it's all these are historical figures that are just switching up the way they don't look like that.
You can talk about Cleopatra.
Cleopatra
was
that
black,
that
by
one's
the way.
crazy.
And
anyways,
no, she wasn't. Anyways.
The point is they're doing all these things and people are like, all right, hold on. That's weird. Like that doesn't make, you're going too far with it now. Like, what? Didn't this whole thing start with we just want to love who we love and be just like you, live amongst y'all, and mind your business, we'll mind ours? And it just came to, if you don't transition your children, you're the problem. Like the switch up was crazy. And that's why this Gen Z like poll or report or whatever, this new data that's come out, is just a response. And obviously, our Andrew Tate probably has influence on that as well, as controversial of a figure he is, because he's let men be men. Like it's okay to be strong. It's okay to be competent. It's okay to like go against with this feminist like agenda telling you that you are lesser than. The Me Too movement was not a good thing.
It's
If
not
something
okay.
wrong happened to you, that's terrible.
Yeah.
It needs to be addressed. It needs to go through the court of law.
100%.
You know, that needs to happen. But like, you don't, just because someone said you did something doesn't mean that you did.
Believe all women, and the fact that kill all men was trending is actually insane. But, yeah, no, it's
He
just
said that the
feminism.
other day.
It's
He's like,
okay.
kill all men. It was trending. I was like, what?
It's trending. It was trending for a long time.
All men. That's cool. If it
So,
said the
yeah,
opposite,
it's
I
just a
think we
response.
would. It'd be an outrage.
Yeah, but anyways, it's so good to see that like it is trending one way. People are waking up. It's encouraging to see there is a change. Turning Point's making a difference. These events are making a difference. You're seeing the real change. So
Yeah.
just seeing the statistic to prove it is amazing.
Yeah, we need to get more young people out here in
Yeah,
Michigan.
yes.
That's something I like hearing what you guys do. I don't even feel like we're qualified to be up here, low key. Like nepotism is amazing, man. I'll tell you. No, I'm just kidding, because we're not qualified.
Thank
no,
you,
I'm just
Mom.
kidding. No, because like Riley, all the things you guys are doing is like actually amazing. Like we need youth to engage youth and get people around. Like it's more the more logical side. It just when you bring the calculation up to a person and actually teach them, you know, give them the facts of the matter, they're going to lean more the direction that you like teach. I mean, obviously at a certain point when you're brainwashed to a level, you're just going to the blue hair people are gone. It's over. But I'm saying a lot of people are willing to change their minds if they have the truth brought to them. So something that we should do. Anyways,
Thank
we've
you
definitely
very
been talking
much,
longer than
Mom,
5
for
minutes.
having us
So
up here.
here you go. Thanks, Mom.
What? The blue hair people is gone.
It's over for now.
Amen. All right. Now, for the grand finale, so excited. Dr. Patrick Byrne is a true American patriot and the embodiment of the American dream. He is the founder of a former CEO Overstock.com. Prior to building a $2 billion enterprise, he earned a Bachelor of Arts in Chinese Study from Dartmouth and a Master of Arts in Philosophy from Cambridge as a Marshall Scholar, and a PhD in Philosophy from Stanford University. Dr. Byrne was named National Entrepreneur of the Year by Ernst & Young. The 20 years as a CEO and e-commerce pioneer were one of the toils, sweat, David versus Goliath matches, an innovative breakthrough. In 2004, Patrick and the Alacari got crosswise, and they have been at odds ever since. Dr. Byrne believes the how do you say that? Thank you. Oligarchy, I know what it means, but it's hard pronouncing. It has two wings, Wall Street and the deep state, and that he has them surrounded. Patrick fully devotes his time, resources, and uncommon leadership, helping to save this great nation. This is so true. Patrick Byrne is a libertarian who believes election 2020 was rigged, so do I, and that the results should be why am I being tongue twisted today? To every person who believes just government derives its power from the consent of the governed. That's us. Welcome, my friend, my boss, Dr. Byrne. I love you. I'm a little tongue twisted today, right? Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. How kind. I have a lavalier. Is this picking up? Is this mic picking up? Can you hear me? Okay, good. I had a presentation, but I think that because of I think I'll probably just leave the title slide up and not even really go through it. There was a lot of text on there. This is probably not a good setting to have a whole lot of text. I'll just tell it to you. I'll just talk to it. Okay, Frederick Douglass. Frederick Douglass seems to me to be especially appropriate for these times because he wrote, of course, before the Civil War, which we may call the Civil War I someday, like we say. Well, I hope not. And for those of you who don't remember Mr. Douglass's story, he was the most admired man, perhaps, of the 19th century in the U.S., most photographed man, even more than Lincoln. And I feel this great kinship to him. I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to start here, but we're going to be moving up to more current events. And now when you invite Should I be working on my mic? Okay. When you invite a philosopher to talk, you have to stomach a little bit of philosophy. What's so amazing, he was born in 1818, he thought, he wasn't sure, and into slavery, and he wrote about it, well, before I get there, when he was 10 years old, his mistress was teaching him to read, and the master said, don't teach him to read, that'll make him unfit for being a slave. So all he wanted to do from that point forward was learn to read. And he traded crusts of bread to white kids so he could learn how to make the letter A and B and such. When he was 10 or 11 years old was when he first learned. He escaped from slavery and went to the North and wrote a book when he was just 10 years later. And it's amazing to read this, knowing that he wrote this just 10 years after learning to form his first letters. And I think that the reason, well, he was such an extraordinary man, but the reason that he was so literate, if he'd been born 75 years earlier, we would have considered him the greatest writer of our founding fathers. And I think this is why. When he was there, when he was 10 or 11, he had first learned to read, he had access to one book. And he wrote about this significantly later. He had access to one book. It was called The Columbian Orator. And it was a book from about 1800 that had been put together to help young Americans learn the art of elocution or something. And it was a book of speeches on the subject of freedom, going all the way back to 2,500 years into our tradition. And that's what he had to read over and over and over. That's what and it was this book of the most magnificent speeches of our 2,500-year intellectual tradition. It's as if you raised a boy on nothing but filet mignon, the very best nutrition he could possibly have. Well, in this case, he was raised intellectually on this one book that he read over and over. And it was really the intellectual tradition that gave birth to the United States. It's a fascinating tradition. Riley used the term brainwashing. It is such a shame what's happened in education in American universities. They absolutely are being brainwashed. Your minds are the target. And they don't want you to know a bunch of things. I used to have a PhD, and I've taught it many times at the university level. I saw it all change around 2008, 2010, and just start being indoctrination. And it's such a shame. I love it when I get to speak to just students. I often walk through more of what that history is, more of what that history, that intellectual history in which Frederick Douglass became so immersed. He in 1851, he gave a speech that is on July 4th that is generally recognized as the greatest July 4th speech in American history. And it was in Rochester, New York, and it was called What to a Slave is the 4th of July. And he speaks repeatedly and critically of the United States. He refers to it always as your country. Because he ran away. When he was about 19 or 20, he ran away. He got to the North. He was working as a stevedore in Boston, and he joined the abolitionist movement and started speaking. And people discovered that this man was this incredible orator and could write so well. And he wrote his first book, like I say, 10 or 11 years after he'd first learned to form the letter A. It's called Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave. It's just such an extraordinary book. I was going to read you some passages out of it, but the print will be too small. So, but in this speech in 1851, while being quite critical of the United States, he's also says he's quite critical of it in a different way than our critics are today. Because unlike people who are saying we got it wrong and it should all be overthrown, Frederick Douglass' position was we had gotten it right and we weren't living up to our principles. And he has this wonderful passage about that no matter what comes, the ship of state is in a dark storm, and no matter what comes, just remember the most important, the ring bolt to your nation's destiny is the principles of the Declaration. That is the ring bolt, and never give that up. Never give that up. So what was that principle, the real principle of the Declaration? The core principle is this expression that just government derives its power from the consent of the governed. That was the great inversion. When we understand ourselves for the first time as that we have rights and we form government as just a corporation to secure our rights, and it derives its power from us. It took 2,500 years for us to reach that deal. And the story of that is philosophers call the passion of the Western mind, this search for freedom. And it went through these stages I tend to think of as, and this is the only philosophy, we'll get past the philosophy into current events if you just give me about 10 minutes of philosophy, that you can think of the stages as Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, Britain, the Netherlands, and the USA, as this evolution of a set of ideas. And at each stage, at each stage in that process, the new ideas that were, or insights that were had and that were accumulated. So for example, slavery. To me, so of course, anything you say about slavery, I know of course that in the US, the two greatest blots on our history, the two most shameful episodes are how we treated the Native Americans and history of slavery. But what the brainwashing of the left does is they just have no sense of proportion. They have no sense of proportion. So let me give you a different way of looking at history than I think is generally taught, although this used to be just, it's so obvious that, before the brainwashing came along, that humanity has had 10,000 generations of slavery. It's had 10,000 generations of slavery, and from that, things changed when Abraham went forth. But everything until then, all of mankind, all of history, every civilization is about slavery. And from that history, Abraham went forth and thus begins Jerusalem, which is an attempt to depart from that idea. The Greeks noticed when they first interacted with people to the east that there was something very strange about it to them. That the Greeks understood their kings to be more powerful than them and such, but they understood them to be men. But to the east, and once you went into what we would call the Middle East and further east, people understood their rulers to be something other than men, some other kind of being that they served. And it's from that worldview that Abraham left. And I'm going to give you one story from the Old Testament. Daniel, speaking to Belshazzar, says there's this moment where he's interpreting a dream, and he says to the king, "You've been judged in the balance and found wanting." I used to teach that was really the magic moment where the passion of the West begins, this search for freedom. Because until then it had not been conceivable. Political authority and divine authority were aligned. There was no way you could judge a king because political and divine authority had not been distinguished. But what Daniel was saying is there is some balance within which even a king can be judged. So there's some external authority that's more significant and more powerful than just political authority. Well, that's really the beginning of our tradition. And then we get to Athens. And Athens, of course, we know democracy is where we started these experiments with democracy. And we learned people should know how much Athens went through. Actually, Greece in general then was about 1,500 little city-states. And they tried all these different things on how to rule themselves. They tried all these different ways of doing it. And they learned, they discovered the exact same pathologies that are getting exposed now to us. They learned how powerful people behind the scenes corrupt the process. They learned how people get entrenched in power. In fact, in Athens, the most successful period in Athens was this 63-year period where they chose their Congress, their equivalent of Congress, like we choose jurors. by random. They were randomly chosen, and they served a year or two, and then they left. And that worked so well because of corruption. If you're going to imagine if we were choosing our house that way, and you didn't, the forces of corruption that have now taken over, they wouldn't know who to bribe. If it's all just being turned over every 2 years or 4 years. So anyway, all kinds of interesting things about the perils of democracy were figured out by Athens, and that's why it was never permanently successful. Rome came along, and so you can walk through the things that were learned at each stage. The Roman Republic split up power. They said, we're not going to concentrate power all in one body. We're going to split it into these different bodies. And this idea of polycentricity, that you have many different centers of power within government, and which creates a republic rather than just some mono, so all authoritarian government, and with rule of law. These ideas come down to us. So I'll give you a couple more, like the Britain and the Magna Carta and the Netherlands. I'll just skip ahead. My point is the Constitution is really the accumulation of these insights that have occurred in each of these stages. I used to be, although Frederick Douglass lived one of the least advantaged lives in American history, and I probably lived one of the most advantaged lives, we have one thing in common, and that is because I was sick through my 20s, I was actually doing graduate work in mathematical logic, but I encountered what I would now call early woke. And I really reacted against it. I was really shocked at what was going on around me in intellectual circles and how people were, this is in the mid-'80s, and people were just embracing a philosophy that turned its back on everything that it felt that had been learned. I had been a student before that in China, and I was very familiar with Marxism and Cultural Revolution and things like this, and I saw that starting to happen here in the 1980s. And as if it seemed to be a deliberate effort to scrub from people's minds in universities a real understanding of our civic history and the logic of so many things. So I sort of evolved into studying the intellectual history of our Constitution and was one of those geeks for a while who could tell you just about every part of our Constitution where the idea came from, that 800 years before some English guy had figured this out or figured that out. And I saw it as the accumulation of a lot of historical insights. What's going on today is a deliberate attack on that. And you really were correct to use the term brainwashing. And I recognize it for what it is. I may as well, Pastor Byrne has told me, I'm okay to come out and tell you what I really think is going on in the world. And so one of those things is there's a best case scenario and a worst case scenario. The best case scenario is you're living through something called a Bezmenov psyop. And a psyop is a psychological operation. And militaries have figured out over the last 5 decades that you can take over countries without firing a shot. There's ways to do it. And the standard model is called a Bezmenov model psyop. And it's 4 stages. And the stages are demoralization, disorientation, crisis, and then normalization. And what that means is you're weakening people through demoralization. You're weakening them. And then you are destabilizing, which is creating a situation that is so topsy-turvy, it's like psychotic to them. Then the third is you're forcing a crisis down their throat. And then you're harnessing everyone's natural desire, and this will sound familiar if you think back a few years. You're in this psychotic stage where it's like surreal, and they give you this deal. The way to get out of that population and get back to normalcy is to accept what just happened. And that's the nature of a Bezmenov psyop. And what we have experienced over the last 4 years conforms to this very clearly. I don't want to I gather I may be among, I try not to mix too many issues at once, but in my view, the demoralization of our society was COVID. There was nothing scientific about the response to COVID, both in that there were forms of early treatment that, it's all come out. Even in the last month, there have now been more scientific conclusions where they have said, okay, hydroxychloroquine does drop 85%, drop 85%, ivermectin even higher than that. They could have snuffed this out with some 5-cent pills from the beginning. So it was unscientific that they didn't do that, and it was especially unscientific that they went to these shots, which are not vaccines. They're novel nanotechnologies that have never been tried on humans. I don't have to rehearse all the reasons the shots were so unscientific. I will tell you that last time I checked, on the CDC website, there had been 1,600 people under 18 years old die of COVID since the beginning. 1,600. And if you do the math over those 3 years, that represents about 1 in 100,000 children. 90% of them were obese. So if you take out obese children, the chances of one dying from being exposed to COVID is about 1 in a million. And so they say to avoid a 1 in a million chance, why would you put a shot in somebody of something that rewrites their DNA that we don't really have any experience with, and then it turns out it's having, it increases your chance of heart trouble 5 times and some cancers by 11 times. In Europe right now, the under 14 age group death rate is up 11 times. Now, under 14 is a very tiny death rate to begin with, so as numbers go, even at 11 times, it's not too substantial. But the overall death rate's up 80%. In the U.S., it's up about 40%. I think it's like a cohort. I don't think that's everybody, but I think middle age. So the COVID, the response to that was so unscientific, and so many people sensed it. Well, the reason was it was necessary for that demoralization phase. The disorientation phase was Antifa and BLM. And I feel differently about BLM than I do about Antifa. So I'm just going to stick with Antifa. But I saw, remember the 5 or 6 city blocks being taken over in Seattle? Nothing being done about it. That's an information operation. That was to disorient you. That was to tell you you're not in the America you think you're in. In October 2020, I was walking down the street in D.C., just happened to be near the FBI. I tend to try to stay away from the FBI, and especially these days. And a bunch of motorcycle guys took over this street in front of the FBI, doing wheelies, the ATVs and motorcycles doing wheelies and spinning out, and all traffic stopped. And they just took over for about 10 minutes in front of putatively the world's premier law enforcement organization. Nobody did a thing. Again, that was all just to totally disorient you. It's an information operation. The purpose of what they're doing is what the clips are going to look like in the evening news. The crisis was a rigged election. And at this point, it seems to me people have to be living under a rock if they need explained why there was nothing fair about the election. It was so obvious. It's so silly. I think that I get mad. I used to get mad at lefties, friends, professors, because I thought they were gaslighting. I thought surely they can see it. They actually can't. They're so brainwashed at this point. They're beyond reason. And then the last stage. So they created this. Think back 3 years. It was just 3 years ago, like going on right now, when we all knew something terrible was happening. Like people were crying and worrying about have we lost the country. It wasn't just losing an election. It was something very bizarre was going on. That was all deliberate. They wanted you to feel that. And so then when they say the way out of that it felt like being psychotic. And the way out of that is you just accept what went on, and everything was normalized, and people like me were expunged. People, we were canceled. That's what cancel culture is about. It's about normalizing things. So now, if they had succeeded with this, that would have been the end of the USA. I don't think that we would ever have made 2024, let alone beyond that. This was a regime change soft coup. It's only, we had one thing going for us, and that's the American people and the power of the American people. And I have to say that you're armed. You know, that Australia and UK and Canada, they all fell. They all fell. There's no way out for them. If we fall in the US, it's over for the world. And the only reason we didn't fall is because the citizenry is armed. Yeah. Yes, and again, I'd never really been a big, I knew that was the historic claim, but it seemed really far-fetched that it would ever make a difference. It sure made a difference this time. It's the only, Australia, they sure regret giving up their arms. But with 22 million vets and 100 million armed people in the U.S., it's hard. But they're still trying, and I'll tell you what the plan is in a minute. So everything I just painted was the best case scenario of what's happening. And that's a takeover. There's really two different groups trying to take us over. One is the Central European World Economic Forum, Davos financial elite crowd. The other is China. China's the senior partner. The junior partner is the Central European. I think of it as Nazi 2.0. It's Nazi 2.0. They realize this time they don't come at us with tanks and guns and battleships. It's an information operation. It's a movement warfare. It's called movement warfare. Very sophisticated. In fact, General Flynn is part of a book called Fifth Generation Warfare. And the brilliance of Fifth Generation Warfare is the people don't even know who the enemy is. In America, people don't even understand who the enemy is. This is not random what's going on. This is being designed and carried out with military precision. Now, we have disrupted it and bought ourselves, this was all supposed to be over in 6 months, and it's amazing we've lasted 3 years, and it's the American people that did that. I like to think that we're going to be the first country that gets through this, and we're going to show why we are still the exceptional country, and we're going to do it without firing a shot. Let me give you the more pessimistic case. The more pessimistic case runs like this, and there are a slide in there with 3 books that it was too busy. The slides are too busy to show on a small screen, but three books on the following subject on China's plans for us. Now, just so you know, I'm a big fan of China, and my undergraduate is in Chinese, and I went and was a student over there in 83, 84. And there was so much I admired about China and still admire culturally. But there have been 3 groups in the Communist Party. And one group thinks that communism was a stage we had to go through, but we got to grow out of it and become something like the US or Singapore or something. One group says communism was necessary to get rid of our feudal past and such, but it's work okay, and we're going to keep things just like they are. And the third group is basically the hardcore Xi Jinping, and that is communism worked, and we're going to keep it forever. We're going to conquer the world with it. We're going to conquer the world with our system. There's, in 1993, 2 colonels in China wrote a book called Unrestricted Warfare. And it's so Chinese not to see, they don't see warfare like we do. They see warfare as having 5 or 6 different levels, like economic and financial, cultural warfare, diplomatic warfare, so on and so forth. It's only the last, I forget if it's the 5th or the 6th, that is warfare as we recognize it, something kinetic, something kinetic, something with and to them, the greatest victory is where you don't have to fight at all. And how that's, between that and a book called The 100-Year Marathon and a book called The Secret Speech of Cher Haotian, who is the, Cher Haotian, who was, there's a man in China who was simultaneously, imagine someone being the Secretary of Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the Vice Chairman of the Democratic Party. Imagine there were a man with those three positions. Well, there was, in 2003, such a man in China. He retired from his military positions. He's still the vice chair of the party. But when he retired, he gave a speech. And it leaked 5 years later as the highest level leak in Chinese history. And the Chinese have never denied it. And the speech, well, I'll just, between this and the 100-Year Marathon, here's the situation. In 1949, when they had their revolution, Mao secretly, internally said, we are going to set China on a program so that in 100 years we disrupt the United States and we emerge as the world's central power, as we were for 2,500 years, and we reduce the U.S. to a vassal state, and we reorganize the whole world on a Beijing-centric scheme. By 2049, the 100-year marathon, that by 2010, they internally changed the goal from 2049 to 2030. They were running ahead of schedule. They now think it's 2028, 2027 they win by. And this is what winning is. And this speech is something that lays out in 2003 how we're going to destabilize the U.S. with a bioweapon and this and that. Here's the plan. They have already issued deeds in China to your homes. They literally have in China. Captains and majors and colonels and generals in the army have deeds. Everyone's been issued deeds to your home. They look at your home on Google Earth. They thank you for that hot tub you put in last summer. They're grateful. They think that they're going to be there by 2028. And here's the plan. And this is all laid out. See, I know this sounds kooky unless you just read their national security literature, which is where this is in it. How they get there, and it's so clever, they don't fight us. It's not going to be like Red Dawn, where we're shooting at cargo planes, dropping paratroopers. It's not like that. We fight. We get stressed and fractured till we're in a civil war. If we go to a civil war, and this has been modeled out, and there's another great book about this called 1 Second After. In 2005, in the national security circles in D.C., they modeled what happened if Ebola hit, or what happened if there's a financial collapse, or what happens if there's an electromagnetic nuclear bomb in the atmosphere that knocks out power. And in all cases, the same thing happens. It was quite a surprise. 90% of us die within 1 year. And it's not from the Civil War people shooting each other. It's from collapse in supply chains of food, fuel, and pharmaceuticals. 50% of people over age 50 are walking around on pharmaceuticals that in the absence of them, you have 6 months to live. There's only 30 days of pharmaceuticals in the supply chain. So the point is they can, by just this, America is tied together by these invisible supply chains, and it's the most complex society that way that there is. The average food an American eats has been trucked 1,500 miles. So it's something that disrupts that. And again, this was all carefully modeled out in a national security planning exercise. I think it turned out it was so surprising and so dangerous, they hushed it all up. But a book came out of it, and it was actually a CIA book, this novel called 1 Second After. They wanted to capture all their learnings from this exercise and give it to the public. If you can find that novel, 1 Second After, it teaches how society unravels based on their war game exercises in D.C. And it's a good book if you want to understand that. And basically within 3 days of a serious disruption, there's starvation in the cities. Within 2 weeks, we go through tipping points that we don't come out of, is the issue. So the plan is that that's going to happen. We go to civil war. This time, they have the UN Blue Helmets, and they have, as I've seen in Asia, plenty of refugee streams. Refugee streams are old men, old women, little kids, and maybe some young women. The refugee streams we've been getting across the southern border are as much as 90% military-age males. That's what our military calls them. These are fighters. And if you remember, there was a lot of curiosity why President Obama, in the last year or two of his administration, put in enormous orders for ammunition and weaponry all over the federal agencies, the IRS, the this, the that. You know, there's a couple thousand federal agencies you don't know, you never hear of, and they're scattered all over. And they've built this enormous arsenal across the federal government. And people were scratching their heads back in 2015, 2016, saying, what is this coming for? Well, the Army, the soldiers have shown up. And the plan is literally, so by the way, in 1993, Russia and China got together. China was terrified about what they'd seen in the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they made this deal. The deal is, when this is all over, Russia gets Alaska and Western Canada. China gets the U.S. and Eastern Canada. And they drive us into civil war. We collapse in civil war. And the cartels and the UN Blue Helmets are given 3 years to basically rape, pillage, loot, and burn America. And when there's nothing left but a carcass, they get given the order to withdraw, and the Chinese colonize. And the Chinese colonize, everyone's to be exterminated except for 30 million whites that they want to use as slaves. And the party line is going to be, we the Chinese, we the great Han civilization, we're the greatest civilization on earth for 2,500 years. We fell into a depression for the last 300 or 400 years. The West took terrible advantage of us, but when we found our footing, we stood up, we pulled the rug out from under the greatest hegemon that ever existed, the United States, and we pulled the rug out, we conquered them, and we solved a problem that has been the central Chinese problem for 2,500 years, which is arable land. They take the world's greatest farm. And this is not something I'm making up. This is in their own national security literature, that this is the plan. And like I say, the goal was originally 2049. They moved it up in 2010. They moved it up to being 2030. They now think it's 2028, maybe 2027. They think we're there. And the next element in the plan, I mean, we have thrown them off schedule. The element in the plan is getting us to go into civil war, which is why the most important thing, if we get into a civil war, they win. And that's why it's going to take a lot of discipline. Because I think for the next 51 weeks, they're going to throw everything at us that they can in order to provoke. And that's what so much of this is. They are trying to provoke you. They know that what they're doing is bad politics. They know that what they've done in your schools and getting, pardon me, but guys in lingerie rolling around on the floor with your kids in libraries and stuff, that is to provoke you. And you got to turn. The only reason we're still in the game, I've actually had some very senior people in government tell me, the one thing that the people who are doing this, Patrick, were not prepared for was that your side would stay peaceful. That was the one thing they were not prepared for. No one thought that they had plans for everything but that. And the only reason we're still in the business is because we have stayed peaceful. And we got to turn the cheek for another 51 weeks, or 50 weeks we're down to. I can tell you that the day after, on January 8th or so, General Flynn and I parted ways in D.C., and when I asked him what the odds were we got to a 2022 election, I think he handicapped them at around 30 or 40%, or under 50%. The chances that we made it to 2024, he thought, were non-existent. That was 3 years ago. It's amazing we've made it this far, and we've made it so far, and it's all bubbling up now. It's all bubbling up. I mean, anyone who can not see how our election process is, anywhere you dig into our election processes, citizens have learned it's nothing like you imagined. It's so, I mean, haven't people been kind of shocked to discover? I guess if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I would have thought that, yeah, I'm sure there's some election frauds, 1 or 2%. It probably cuts both ways, probably favors the Dems by 1%. Now I understand when they want to, they can do 15 to 20%. So that's where you are. It all comes down to or at least our efforts, we know where to focus them. It's all coming down to this election in 50 weeks, 51 weeks. If that is lost, we as a country are through a tipping point we can't get out of at that point. They'll have the judiciary, and these are people who have these are those people that I reacted to in academia 35 years ago, who I realized these people have no commitment whatsoever to the U.S. Constitution or to that intellectual tradition. They think that they're very smart. They're smarty pants. And if I walk through my slides, I've started to use in my slides a figure from the comic strip Dilbert. Do you know Dilbert? You remember the pointy hair manager? That's a perfect symbol to describe what we're up against. You can think of political thought on a spectrum, and at one end of the spectrum, there's people who view society like it's a bee colony, and the proper role of government is like the proper role of a beekeeper who is there to nurture and protect the bee colony, the beehive, and to keep threats away, but doesn't really conceive of himself as giving orders to the bees or managing the bees. The bees manage the bees, and his job is to create this environment where they can do what they're supposed to do. At the other end of the political philosophy are people whose mentality is like the pointy hair manager in Dilbert. And it's the guy who thinks he's in the corner office and has got all the smart ideas. If you don't know the Dilbert strip, the running joke over and over is the boss is this pointy hair guy in the corner office, and he comes out and he's always got new ideas, and he's read something, or he's been to some conference and he's learned some new management theory, and they're all really stupid. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He never knows what he's talking about, and that's basically the running gag of the script. Well, imagine a world a government run by those people. That's what they are. They think that they are the experts that can sit, and they're the real experts. And they look down. They look down at everybody else. And they're the real experts. And the world would be a much better place if there were experts like them able to run things. And academia is filled with them. University life is filled with them. It was so distasteful to me. Like people who'd never run an ice cream store, but they were sure full of ideas how they're going to redesign the world. And it's like listening to someone like, well, I shouldn't name individual politicians too much, but listening to, well, most of our politicians is like listening to that pointy hair manager from the Dilbert strip to me. Guys have no idea what they're talking about. They're filled with plans. AOC, okay, I'll use AOC as an example. They're just like the pointy hair, and that's who they are. And it's been, imagine our nation, and very much our Constitution was written by people whose idea of society was more like that beehive, and that the proper role of government was like the proper role of a beekeeper in protecting and helping to nurture the beehive. And instead we're up against people who are Dilbert pointy hair bosses, and they think because they have these plans on how to make society so much better, to them the U.S. Constitution is just an inconvenience. It's just a set of handcuffs keeping them from getting on with their plans that would make the world so much better. So we are coming down to the wire. It all comes down to this. There's going to be some tremendous blows coming from our side to them. One of them starting next week. You're going to hear stuff about Jack Smith next week that I'm behind. And I can tell you all that you're going to know. And when you hear the big news about Jack Smith next week, you'll know that. Say again? There's a whistleblower case going to be filed. And when you see what's in the whistleblower case, Jack Smith is a bad boy. And there's more things coming. There's more. there's more things coming. It's almost laughable at this point, the people who try to say that there's no signs of election fraud. There's so much that's gone on and that's now bubbled up. I've been in from the beginning, but for example, in Georgia, in Fulton County, Georgia, there's 150,000 ballots that were mailed-in ballots, but they're unfolded. And the ovals in them are filled in perfectly, like by a machine. And there's a stack of affidavits from people who saw this, who worked at it and described these things. That's never been examined. They were trying to destroy it. It took a special judicial order to keep Fulton from destroying it. Well, in any normal world, and by the way, Georgia is a place that Trump lost by 15 or 16,000 votes. So in any normal world, that set of behaviors from Fulton County would be all it would take. And by the way, just on a few days ago, their criminal defense attorneys quit their defense of Fulton County, it was over the last weekend. And they were going to a hearing this week. There's a judge finally going to make them turn those things over. And those two defense lawyers quit. This just came out today. They not only quit, they have joined the defense team of one of the Trump 19 people indicted, and they've. But it goes on and on, and there's a wonderful attorney up here, Stephanie Lambert, that I've been backing. She is a gutsy workhorse. There's a fellow named Eric Spakeen she brought in who got access to the Detroit mail-in ballots, and between 8% and 20% of them were stuffed in 2020. Everywhere, the people we've been up against have been speaking out of both sides of their mouths. They've been saying, well, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? And on the same time, they have been blocking. They've had the most prestigious law firms in America shutting down any citizen who's trying to get any evidence. Anybody, and if a lawyer picks up a pen to help us, they get the Bar Association come after. So it's been taken, what should have taken 3 days has taken 3 years, but we're finally getting the information. And it's crazy how dirty the elections were. Did you know Maricopa, Phoenix, 2020, had 1.2 million mail-in ballots, and they examined the signatures and approved all 1.2 million, not a single one. Now, normally, of course, there would have been tens of thousands of signatures that didn't match. And the fact that they found 0 tells us they really didn't check, which raises the question, if they really didn't check, did Biden know that beforehand? And which just means it's an egg that can't be unscrambled. You have no way of we have no way of getting to that answer. Because it's clear they didn't check, you have to assume that one side knew and took advantage of it. So there's no way, normally when there's been fraud in an election, you can go into court and argue and sort of dissect what happened, and we got to discount this and discount this and discount this. But this fraud has been so systemic, trying to unscramble what the election would have looked like without the fraud is like trying to unscramble an egg. You can't unscramble an egg. So that's where we are. I don't mean to be discouraging, because we're in a much better position than we were 3 years ago. It was we were dangling by a thread 3 years ago. And we're coming right down to the wire. Your children's grandchildren, yet unborn, are crying out to you through time and space, saying, get involved now. They will never taste the sweet air of freedom if it isn't fixed now. And the thing to do is, at this point, for this election, is to be working on voter rolls. That's another thing they've discovered. In New York, they just disallowed like 2 million, turns out there were like 2 million fake people on the ballots, on the roll, and they're all voting. They're all voting. And, yes, sir. So, yeah, I'm going to stop. I'm going to go to Q&A for a little while. Yes, sir.
In L.A. County, judicial watch through a FOIA request, there was over 1 million names, just one county, shouldn't have been there. So they all got mail-in ballots. That was one county.
Yeah.
Suing around the country.
you know, this level of scofflaw, boy, have our court system let us down. The state courts just have shown themselves to be, when we get through this and when we show how corrupt 2020 was. Remember all the times the other side has said, well, 60 courts looked at this and they found nothing. Yeah, that's going to be what we're going to be able to say when we prove, and we're going to be able to prove before you can believe it, we're going to be able to prove how corrupt 2020 was. And it's going to be what we're saying is how corrupt is the judiciary? 60 judges looked at it and they missed it. But so that's going to be in our favor, not their favor anymore. They are so corrupt, but the federal judges, that they let it get this far is a disgrace as well. Sir?
I'm trying to understand the elites, the pointy-head people that all of the things that come down and screwing everything up. Do they think that when the revolution comes, they're going to end up on the top?
Yes.
They realize.
Yes, not knowing any history. They think that their vision is a new type of world where some sort of Silicon Valley techno elites and financial elites and the left elites are running the world, and maybe it's a population and maybe much smaller. You know, there's this dream that they're reducing population 80 or 90%. That may be what they're thinking. The other thing that they're thinking is if China is standing up and emerging as the world's superpower, it's just like when Athens fell to Sparta. There were 30 families that stood up and said, from Athens, and said, we're not really cool with this Athenian democracy anyway. Sparta, instead of colonizing us, just put us in charge. It was called the Age of the 30 Tyrants. And for 8 months it lasted. These 30 tyrants ran Athens. I think these people, many of them made their own deals with China. Look at Xi Jinping was in San Francisco yesterday, meeting with Borla, the head of Pfizer, and BlackRock, and this and that. There are elites having sucked our country dry through a broken, corrupt Wall Street system, which was my other little adventure in politics many years ago. How corrupt Wall Street is, having drained us dry. I think their plan is basically they're surrendering us on a silver platter to China and hoping that they get to be the new something or other. So they have some kind of plan that it advantages them. I've always wondered how could people be so in favor of financial arrangements with our government that could not possibly be stable, that would eventually have to collapse. And I've now bought into the theory that there are people all along who knew that these deficits were going to eventually crater us, and their plan was crater us and they would take over in the rubble and emerge as we emerged as the United Soviet States out of the rubble. But I think that they're dreaming. They don't understand that, the first thing the Vietnamese did in the South after they took care of everyone who worked with America, they took care of all the Viet Cong. They didn't want any competing center of gravity. So I think that they're dreaming if they think that there's a place for them in the new world. I think that they don't understand China's plan. The World Economic Forum thought that when they came out of this, they would be some sort of European superstate running things, but in part as junior partner to China. I think that they have realized, I know that they have realized that that's not China's plan at all. China really plans to take us and colonize us. And that's why there's now tension between the World Economic Forum and China. I want to say there's a woman who's been holding her hand up. Yes, please. Yeah.
My question was using foils like Dr. Fauci, funneling our money to do the Wuhan lab, the biological warfare of COVID. Wouldn't that be more than they're likely to try this again?
Except they've realized that it doesn't, they can't, I think they're going to have a harder time panicking us like they did last time, and we're skeptic. So they come at us with something else, a water shortage, a food shortage. Seems to me they're engineering a global food shortage. Ukraine, nothing about Ukraine war makes sense to me. I was raised in geopolitics by a hawk's hawk, a guy who was chairman of the Joint Chiefs under Reagan. So he was the warriors, twice. He was his, and he and George Shultz and Henry Kissinger were all of a cut of the same cloth. And in 2015, he took me to see Shultz and Kissinger, and they all agreed. It makes no. This was when Ukraine was first on the boiler, and they all agreed it's nuts for us to be risking World War III over Ukraine. There's no reason at all that Ukraine shouldn't just be something like Finland or Switzerland, and there's no reason at all we needed to accept it into NATO. This was the position of 3 Reagan-era hawks. Yet for some reason, since 2014, 2015, the Obama, Biden, Hillary crew have just been adamant that we have to have a fight, that we have to absorb NATO into Ukraine. Ukraine into NATO. You know, if NATO absorbed Ukraine, then that means American tanks would be 230 miles from Moscow. Well, Moscow's been invaded in the last 2 centuries 5 times from the West. And they've got real memories about that. And so that was an incredibly provocative act, guaranteed to pull us into this situation. There's no reason at all we could not have taken a deal that said Ukraine is going to be for 20 years. Putin was offering in a way that could have been guaranteed that we just don't talk of bringing Ukraine into NATO for 20 years. That's all we had to do, and we couldn't accept that deal. NATO has dropped from 36 million people to 21 million people now. It was never winning. America propaganda was telling you guys otherwise. It was never winning. Remember how Russia's always been on the verge of collapse, is going to collapse, for the last year? Russian ruble's up 20%, their economies, everything's doing fine. Europe's on the verge of collapse. This was all, I think that Biden may in fact, first I don't think, of course we know he himself is not calling the plays, but more, I think that he may be a puppet whose mission is to lead us into these, like I've always thought Ukraine was a kabuki dance. We're going through this kabuki dance, and I know what the final scene is. The final scene is Russia has what it wants in Ukraine, and I think China has what it wants in Taiwan. And everything that's going on is just kind of this script we're marching through. There's nothing about these decisions they're making and that seem organic to me. There's nothing about the Ukraine war. It's the most avoidable war of our lifetime. And it was a perfectly acceptable solution. And we've destroyed it. We've insisted on destroying it. Yes, ma'am.
Tell people, that I believe that Joe Biden is dead and they have an actor in the White House. I have compared his bottom teeth, his earlobes, his nose profile is nothing like the old Joe Biden, his head shape. Do you think that possibly they've got Obama controlling a puppet?
Well, 2 different questions. Is Biden is Biden one person or more than one person? Is one question. I know I have seen the close-ups of what look like a mask and stuff. It is pretty hard to turn your back on some of that stuff. I don't know whether I buy that, but it is the case that he is controlled. And yes, Obama is, lives 8 blocks away, but it really, Susan Rice has been the vector this whole time. She goes over to Obama's each morning, and she's over at the White House, and but now Susan Rice stepped down. Valerie Jarrett.
Well,
Yeah.
That might lead into my second question. Why do you think that the typical Davos attendees all avoided Davos this year?
Well, I think that we've caught everyone by surprise by that we stopped this. This was all supposed to be over, frankly, by June of 2021. It was all supposed to be over. They didn't even respond to people like me and Flynn and the Reawakening, the people who were still doubting the election, we were just, they didn't even acknowledge that there were people who doubted the election until we got to sort of 6 months later, June of 2021. And that's just the color revolution playbook, just to freeze people like us out. And we've been studying this. I mean, I've been studying this since this happened 3 years ago. There's nobody's ever made it more than 6 months. No color revolution ever. Everything just dies out over 6 months. It's the American people have proven themselves. It's still, they needed to be reminded of their love for freedom. But they have proven themselves, and they have dragged this out 3 years, and if anything, we've just gained and gained. 72% of Americans don't believe Biden won fairly at this point. So it's really, if we can keep this up. But whether Biden himself, it is possible that there's some actor playing Biden underneath a mask. I don't have a firm opinion on that. At this point, nothing would surprise me. I mean, it does sound crazy, but I acknowledge that I've seen some of these videos too, that it just doesn't look right. And there's one where the guy's chin seems to be melting or something. And yes, ma'am, sir.
Interestingly enough, Putin was all behind Germany going green because he knew it wasn't going to work and that he would have to sell them oil. I mean, that was so obvious that, Germany pays, 3 times the energy that France does its nuclear.
Yeah, I was 35 years ago, I was a student at Cambridge, and a guy named James Lovelock came over from Oxford to speak. He was the scientist, I think, he was the founder of the Gaia hypothesis, which is like the uber environmentalist, vision that we're just one organism. And he gave this talk about how it may be too late to save the environment, but if there's any chance, it's going radically to nuclear. And in 1988, he was saying that. And it made a lot of sense to me. But the opposition, I think the opposition of the left is, at the end of the day, they just don't like freedom. When I was a child, the left said that if we were running the world scientifically, it would be more prosperous and there'd be more industrialization and a stronger economy. That's by the 1980s, by the end of the 80s, they were basically saying socialism because science. And then everything fell apart in the Eastern Union, and they were kind of quiet for the 90s. They came back around 2000 saying socialism because ethics. Every university got these ethics programs, which basically teach kids to be ethical, you have to be a socialist. Then it became socialism because you're racist. And then it became basically socialism because climate change. And now it's socialism because shut up, basically. But what they just want power. They just want power. And the argument, it used to be that we're going to be able to have a better industrialization. Then it's all these other reasons. Now they're saying, well, it's because of socialization, we'll keep things from getting industrialized and we'll return us to. I was just over in the Netherlands, which is the world's largest food exporter over the United States, they're wiping out 40% of the farms. It's not, they want to, I think this whole thing about eating bugs and all that stuff, that's to make you submit. 15-minute cities and eating bugs, they're just going to slowly, people who I get the most heartbreaking messages from people where they tell me, Mr. Byrne, we're over in Germany, and we're fighting back, and the lights are setting here again, but we are fighting and we're holding on, but all eyes are on the United States of America, because we all know that if the lights go out there, it goes out for all of us. But if you get through this, the U.S., that we all have a chance. And all of us who are paying attention know that within the USA, it's this populist movement. It's the MAGA movement. That's what's keeping that. That's the only thing that gives America a chance.
Do you think the situation between Israel and Palestine is more kabuki theater like Ukraine meant to divide us and distract us into killing each other?
Well, there's a lot of oddities about what happened, certainly. A lot of oddities. I'm not sure that this administration does. One of the things that's odd is the readiness with which Biden has rushed to the defense of Israel. He's from a wing of the Democratic Party. We see now what the Democrats really feel, how they really feel about Israel. And he's from that wing. And so it's very suspicious to me, the eagerness with which he is. I feel like we're being led into traps. I felt Ukraine was a trap. We send the fleet to Eastern Mediterranean. Are we going to discover, that they get taken out with some hypersonic missiles and we lose some major ships? And that will be a whole game changer because we're the world's greatest naval power. And if it turns out that our ships can be taken out with hypersonic missiles, so I just feel like we're being lured into traps. All that said, I by nature tend to stand with Israel. I mean, it's a country, and people forget. People forget this. Israel was, after World War I, there was a San Remo peace conference where the world got together as it existed, and they agreed we're going to have there was a question what to do with the corpse of the Ottoman Empire. And they agreed they'd create a Jewish homeland. And then the League of Nations affirmed there would be a Jewish homeland. And then the United Nations did it in 1947. So it isn't like that we just created Israel or Britain just created Israel. People talk about the Balfour Declaration, and there was a Zionist movement and such. But at the end of the day, the world created Israel. And it seems to me that that puts the lie to all the claims that it is a colonial project. It's not a colonial project. The world recognized them as so. So I intuitively side with them, but I do wonder. I do have the sense that with what's going on there, we don't really know. I think that we're seeing all the shadows on the walls of a bunch of things. I don't trust that we have a full picture. What's going on there? Yes, ma'am.
What do you think of the Awasami, the Indian guy, winning the presidential election instead of Trump? Because I don't know if you've been following the Republican debates, the presidential.
Vivek? You're talking about Vivek?
Presidential debates.
Vivek, yeah. What do I think of him?
Yeah, I mean, but Trump's been winning the debates. He's not even there.
Yeah, well, Vivek, first I have met Vivek. We had a little breakfast. Okay. Fine guy. He's very careful never to criticize Trump from what I've seen. I think that I think he'll be a great cabinet member for Trump. And I see that there's an idea in the last few days of him being RNC chair. Boy, would that be a step up over Ronna McDonald. Now, I know that there's a lot of Trump lovers here. I have to suggest sometimes the fellow makes unforced errors. And his support, if you've read my stories about my involvement in the election and in what happened on December 18th, he has people around him that he makes some unforced errors. And he supported, just a few months ago, he supported Romney, Ms. Romney, Romney McDaniels. And how could, so he has some unforced error. He supports people, and there are other tremendous people that he doesn't, that I think he should support, but he doesn't. I think he has staff around him that are still swamp. He got rid of about half his swamp creatures, and some of them are still there. And some good people are there, too.
Well, now that you brought it up, I guess that's my question. Do you think he's going to be in jail, or is he going to be able to run?
Well, it could be both. There's nothing in the Constitution that says he can't run from jail. So, will he what? Yeah. Well, there was a Boston mayor, an Irish guy, Curley, who ran from jail and won and stayed in jail and served as mayor. Yeah, I would say he could still run. I do worry that they're going to, well, first of all, something's going to happen next week that you were going to see a liver punch. You ever see Mike Tyson hit someone with a liver punch? We got a liver punch for Jack Smith next week. That will change the whole nature of what's going on that side. Now, he still has these crazy cases in New York and Georgia to be, but I think that those are crazy. I think that the one case he's really got to worry about is Jack Smith's case. Jack Smith really has two cases. He's got the documents case and he's got the J6 case. And I don't know how familiar with like the details of that story, but I know exactly the lie they would be trying to sell, and my testimony puts an axe through the head of that lie, which is why the J6 committee would not meet with me. I took out ads around D.C. saying, hey, I'm the only, everyone else is dodging you and taking the fifth and this and that. I'll come in, no lawyer. I'll spend all day. I'll tell you everything that happened. They would not meet with me until I shamed them so much. Eventually and I've even heard that they have said afterwards that the J6 committee fizzled because I covered for Trump. I did not cover for Trump. I spoke word for word the truth, but the truth makes it impossible for them to sell the lie they want to.
That's right.
Okay. Let me tell you, who here has heard of this 4-hour meeting on the night of December 18th, 2020, when I snuck into the Oval Office? Have you guys heard of that one? Trump was anything but a tyrant trying to clutch at power. He was anything but that. He was a tired 73-year-old guy who'd had enough. And he was telling me, Pat, I'll have no trouble. He said on at least 2, maybe 3 occasions in this famous meeting, Pat, I will have no trouble resigning. On January 20th, conceding. On January 20th, Marine One's going to land right over there, Pat. I can walk out of here, fly away with my head held high. My life is going to be so much better. I've got my golf courses. I've got my friends. Believe me, Pat, I'm never going to spend a night in this city again. That's what he was saying, but he was also saying, but how can I do that? If I think this election has been rigged and maybe there's a foreign government involved, how can I just walk away? And it was entirely appropriate. His deliberations were entirely appropriate. To me, it was not red meat enough, because I was saying you have to, because I knew that it had been rigged and that China was behind it. So he was anything but a tyrant clutching at power. You're going to have to hook me, Bernadette, when I've gone on too long.
I have a couple things that I wanted to bring up, but I also heard that this is going to be the happiest Thanksgiving we ever had. Whatever that means, I think there's something good coming. Have you connected with Pat Colbeck at all?
Oh, I love Pat Colbeck.
Yeah.
He's a real hero.
We've seen him around Michigan a lot, and he has proof of the elections with the Dominion machines and all of the fraud that's been going on. And I think he's starting to get a breakthrough on that too.
The breakthroughs are coming all over the country, and people need to stay in touch with each other, because the piece that Pat Colbeck surfaces here fits the lock that somebody else has going down in Georgia.
Correct.
And there's a
Yep. Yep.
Mm-hmm. He opposed
But-
it, Pat.
Well, I don't.
Pat Colbeck is not behind indicting the Secretary of State in the Bureau of Elections.
But he's got a lot of the information they need, though.
We have the information to indict them now.
Good.
We need to help.
Go for it. Well, my other thing is the connection thing. I don't know how many of you know about the Michigan prayer that's been happening every night since the election was stolen. I have the number if anybody wants to put it down. It's from 9 to 10 every night. It's Rick Wozniak's, the one of Transformation Michigan. He's one of the ones that put it together with 2 other great Christian guys. So if you want the number, it's 727-731-2247. 727-731-2247. And you would just get on the call and mute yourself and listen. He has many different speakers on, and it's really, really wonderful. So a lot of information comes out of it and a lot of prayer.
Well, there's lots of theories about what that's going to come. 1913, we went to a central bank, and the history of all fiat currencies eventually goes to zero. Monetary regimes don't last. We've been on the current one since 1971. It's crumbling around the world. It's not something they can do anything about. There is going to be a financial implosion. All they can do is delay it by pumping free money into the economy to keep it propped up. It's just a question of when that comes, do we want to emerge as America again, all cleaned up, or do we want to merge what they want, what the hard left wants? There's actually, it's called the Cloward-Piven strategy. Anyone ever hear of this? In the 1960s, there was a husband-wife sociologist at Columbia University, and Cloward and Francis Piven. They were students for democratic society. They were key figures in that. And the strategy was, we're going to overwhelm the government with social welfare claims, social welfare, until it can't keep up, it collapses, and then out of the rubble, we emerge as the leaders of the new, bold, socialist United States of America. That is their plan, and that's why I've never understood my lefty friends as we've argued about things over the years. They seem to have no care about the unsustainability of the policies that, and now I finally got it. We were playing different games. I thought we were playing the game of how do we make this society better and how do we do things that work. They were of the game of they just don't care if they destroy society. And what I've also learned is things that I have observed in my life, and I know one way, the Christian community knows the same things but in a different way. And I was sharing this with Bernadette today. I've noticed, I've come to the conclusion in life, there are people, I'm going to tell you, that there are certain types of people, I'll get back to with a story about that, but who just really don't care about contributing. They don't really think in terms of what do I bring to the party. In fact, if what they do is they destroy, they seem to bring them some satisfaction. And I used to think I was nuts to believe that, but over the last 10 or 20 years, I came to see that. Well, now I understand that the belief in the Christian community about Satanists is the holy trinity for Satanists is division, deception, and destruction. And they're just people who want to do that. Well, that's the same thing I had figured out about the world in this just from a very different way. But you know the exact same thing. There are people they just get something out of that. And I can tell you just what they're like. There's a story that means, it's a personal story. It explains so much to me. I was in 8th grade, and I took a French class, 1 year of French, and there was this one guy in the back, not an A student, let's say, Roger, we called him, but a wonderful guy. We all loved Roger. And there were the smarty pants kids up front of the class. Well, years later, we all graduated from high school, and those smarty pants kids, I'm thinking of, went off to Ivy League schools. And Roger I think went to a semester of community college or something, didn't really like it, dropped out. This is 1982, 1983. And this was in Bethesda, Maryland, and there was this old dilapidated 99-cent theater we would go down to. This guy got $30,000 together from his friends and family and went on and got them to lease him this dilapidated theater, and he put in a pizza oven and a keg. And no one had ever heard of this before, the idea of watching movies and someone was going to serve you pizza and have beer. And it was called the Bethesda Cinema and Draft House. Now, if you're in Washington, D.C. these days, this is a Washington institution. It's famous. Anyway, we saw by the time I was a senior in college, this guy was driving around in a nice car, had the Gordon Gekko shoe phone, was very, very successful. And he was still the same wonderful, nice guy he'd always been. Roger, I just celebrated. I thought it was terrific. I ran into, and it was so telling, I ran into, in one summer, 2 of those smarty pants kids who'd been sitting up front. One had gone to Harvard, one had gone to Yale. And it was the first time I'd ever heard this, they said the same thing. And it was the first time I ever heard this expression, but then I was to hear it many times in subsequent years. What kind of a society do we live in that would value what he does, beer and pizza, over here I've been mastering the difficulties of Foucault's deconstruction of asymmetric power relationships at Harvard, and this is my master's thesis, and what does it tell us that we live in a society where no one will pay me for that, but this guy is driving around in a Cadillac. And I said, Danny, society does get its chance to value that every day. And they're deciding, you can write your master's thesis and put it up for $1 and try to sell it. And when people are buying the beer and pizza, that is society deciding what is more valuable to them. And I don't see anything wrong with that at all. And what was especially funny was I recognized that if you had an emotion like that, you certainly shouldn't share it. But what was funny was that these people had that attitude towards our old friend Roger, and they were happy to talk about it. They want to sit and talk. They were so bitter and nasty that guy, there's a really good rule of life is A students go into teaching, B students go to work for C students. Just the way of the world. And that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. Yeah. And but those are the kind of people who are the hard left. They're these bitter, puny people who got A's all their life, and the authority figures gave them the promotions, and then they get to this place, but it's the other guy with the beer and pizza joint who succeeds, and they just think something's wrong with that. Something's wrong with that society when that happens, because I was the one who got A's all along, and everything my teacher told me to do, I stepped and did. So something's wrong with this world, and they are puny, and they're bitter, and they hate. And to them, the left, being a hard lefty, is their way of they think they get to run things. Because no one would ever, in a free market, no one will ever hire them or get them to do, or they'll never be successful. So I think those are the kind of people you're up against. Yes, ma'am. Well, don't for a moment think it seems hopeless. It seemed hopeless. I wouldn't have told you this 3 years ago, but 3 years ago it was looking pretty hopeless to me. We've gotten through that phase. We're really in the game. Keep doing what we're doing. Keep bringing pressure on the politicians. I know that, we traded from McCarthy to Mike Johnson. Now people have questions about Mike Johnson, but I think it's a big step up from McCarthy. We almost slid off a cliff 3 years ago, and we have scrambled our way back. We're in the game, and just keep this up. If you really want to do something specific, getting involved in cleaning your voter rolls and getting involved in working the election are the local things you can do. But also all the resistance against what's going on in school boards. The best advice is to join. As an individual, you don't have much power, but by joining churches where you have pastors who will fight for the right things, and civic organizations, joining civic organizations of people aligned with your values is where your power comes from, and getting those going. Okay, I think I've overstayed. Thank you.
That was amazing.
Thank you. What do you want me to do?
Yes, we want everyone to come up that spoke. We want to get a quick picture. We want to get a picture of all of us that spoke real quick. So you come up, Tim.
Okay.
Definitely. Yeah, yes, definitely come up. Heidi. Yeah, yeah. Heidi, come up.
Thank you.